Thank you. Wow, I am so excited to be here, and I'm going to tell you this. I landed 2 hours ago, so just, be easy on me, right? Because it was so important for me to be part of this amazing conference, and I am just beyond happy to be here. So give it up for my heels, first of all. Just once again, what do you care? Like, they're painful. Okay. All right. No. I have. Yes, of course, but I wouldn't be able to feel my feet. Now I still have a little bit of feeling in there. Anyway, so hi everyone. Good morning. My name is May, and I want to tell you about the transition that I made about 3 years ago. So, having written code in various different programming languages, I wrote in JavaScript and Python, in Clojure, which is my favorite one. Yes, that's not mine. Yeah, okay. So, I developed different services. I wrote complex data pipelines, and I was looking for a new challenge. I wanted something that would throw me off. And I mean, what's a better challenge than to develop tools for developers? That's the biggest challenge of all, in my opinion at least, because developers are not very easy to make them happy, right? So that's when I decided to become a DevOps engineer or a platform engineer. There are differences, but that's what I wanted to do. And here's what I got from this, and I'm jumping right to the end. By becoming a platform engineer, I was able to be exposed to a wide range of problems and then a wide range of solutions, because I need to provide solutions for developers so they will be able to do what they need to do. I need to support the big production issues that they have. Maybe I need to support just the CI specifics that they need for their specific service. So every time that I work on a different challenge, I work with a different team, I'm exposed to the architecture that they have. I'm exposed to the code that they write. And so this way, I became a better developer. And like I said, the other thing that I got from it is I wanted to get as far as I can from my comfort zone. I wanted to have those moments where I just feel stupid in front of my computer and be like, I quit. Okay, I don't quit, but I'm very mad right now. That's how I felt. And those are the feelings that I wanted to have, because in those moments when you feel that you know nothing, it means that you're about to learn something, and it means that you're going to become a better developer. So now is a very good time to actually start the talk and tell you how it went, what did I do to get to where I'm at today, going from being a backend developer for over 5 years to now being a senior platform engineer. But before I do that, let me introduce myself a little bit more. So my name is Beisaron. Like I said, I've been a backend engineer for over 5 years. Today, I am a senior DevOps engineer at Forder. I've been writing in many different programming languages, and I'm going to say again that Clojure is still my favorite one, just so people can argue with me about that later. And they do. Why do people want to argue about that? Clojure is great. You see, now I gave you a reason to argue with me. And as you can see, I'm an international public speaker and a mentor, which means I love to help other people become the tech speakers that they want to be. And I, already mentioned my heels, but here's another picture of them just because I love them so much. All right, let's begin. And I'm going to describe now what we're going to talk about today. So the first part that I'm going to talk about is learn. And look, becoming a platform engineer, it's not about the tech stack. I will describe generally what I had to learn, but it's really not about that. You don't need me here to tell you what are the things that you're going to need to know in order to become a DevOps engineer. You can literally Google that, ChatGPT, or just the job application is going to tell you that. I do have, however, a few tips on that. So after we'll talk about that, I will go over to the part where I learned that the most important thing that I need to be able to do as a platform engineer is to be able to listen. It meant that I had to be able to transition my mindset from what to what? Well, you'll see when we'll get there. And the last part is be the force. What does it mean? What kind of force? Again, I'm not going to tell you. So why did I tell you at all about this agenda? I don't know, because that's what speakers do. So here we got over the agenda. Let's dive in. Or let's roll. I love this one. Okay. That's what I felt. Stress. When I looked at the amount of things that were prepared for me as I just joined Forder, I just felt like, I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know how long it's going to take. There are so many things, because here's what I needed to learn. I needed to learn a lot about cloud computing infrastructure, infrastructure as code, understand what it means, because this is what we have at Forder. We have infrastructure as code, a Python language that is being translated into CloudFormation templates. And these were a lot of words that, other than Python, I had no clue what it means. The other thing that I needed to learn was about continuous integration and continuous deployment. Now, as a developer, I knew that it happens, but I just didn't know how. And the last thing that I needed to learn about was monitoring and logging. And again, I knew about these just as a user, not what it meant to select the tools or what it means to develop those tools for developers. And then again, how am I going to learn all of this? Breathe, my young Bedouin, somebody said at some point, I'm sure in one of the movies. And so the first thing that helped me was to be able to start using my own words to describe the things that I need to learn. This is how I did that. So look, this is a very simplified diagram of Forder's CI/CD pipelines. What you see over here is at the top of the top part is the CI part, and you can see that we have Jenkins pipelines doing the CI, and then in the CD we have CloudFormation and Chef recipes. All of this is being pushed to GitHub, and then later on Jenkins pipelines are doing the rendering in order to do the necessary provisioning. So I looked at this diagram and I was like, what? So what I did was I just took the original diagram and I drew this one, because like I said, it's a simplified one, okay? So now I was able to say, okay, I have some calibrated questions. I can ask, why are we using Jenkins? What are the alternatives? I can ask, how did we build the pipelines? What made it special for Forder? What is the use case that Forder needed? And by asking those specific questions, it helped me to better understand what's going on there. Now look, this is the most important thing. If you're able to ask questions like, what are some common use cases for this tool? Or what alternatives were considered? Then you're able to learn more about the use cases, the specific use case of your company. But then you're also able to learn about other alternatives, and maybe later on down the line, suggest those alternatives. And that's exactly what I did. Because when I just joined Forder, like I said, we had only the Python for infrastructure as code. And today we have, in addition to that, Helm, but we will talk about that later as part of our Kubernetes. But that was something that I suggested. And that was part of the things that I learned right at the start, and I tried to understand what are the alternatives for infrastructure as code. I learned about Helm for infrastructure as code for Kubernetes, and that's how I suggested it later on. So take the time, when you learn about something, take the time to ask a lot of questions and then try to figure out the answers. Go with those answers to the people in your team and ask them what they think about it. And if it's a match, good. If it's not a match, even better, because now you have a discussion with your teammates. So like I said, use your words, calibrated questions, and then I had a memory attack. which means that I was still overwhelmed with all of those details of the diagrams and documentation that they provided. But then there was another problem because all of these things were written. But I'm sure that everyone here also has those things in their work where it's not written anywhere. It's just something that somebody told you how to do and everyone just know how to do it. So for example, there is a specific way to do testing of the Jenkins scripts, and it's just something that nobody wanted to take care of at any point. So now everyone knows that they need to press in a certain place and then paste the script that they want to test. That sounds fun, right? But I mean, I was like, how am I supposed to remember all of these? Because that was not the only one. There were a few more stuff like this that were done either manually or, just a few more commands and that's it. So what I did, I just started to document these things. And as you can see, it's not the most professional documentation that you can find. It's just a screenshot with like a bunch of arrows and I wrote to myself, paste here, right? But then if I have one like this, okay, I'll remember. If I have 5, 10 things like that, I will not remember where I need to paste, where I need to press. So I just started to create those very lazy documentation pages, but people actually liked them. So I started to share these. And this was one of the first things that I was able to contribute to Further as a new recruit, because what else can I contribute? I didn't know a lot or anything at all about DevOps, but I was able to give the perspective of a newcomer and say, okay, I don't understand this and this. I'm going to write this documentation myself, but also I'm not going to remember this, this, and this. And then I created these, and now it's part of our official documentation. I mean, look at that. But it's so easy to create. So I call those the how-to guides because it looks really good in the documentation titles, but again, it's just a bunch of arrows. So after that, after I learned some of the core tools that we have in our tech stack, I moved on to the part where I learned that I needed to listen, or transition my mindset into listening more than just executing the things that I'm asked to do. So let me tell you a little story. One of my first tasks was to build a brand new automation system for one part of our deployment system. And I was so happy about it because I did it in a very reasonable time, and I got to learn a lot about our deployment pipelines, and I was able to automate something that has been manual for that long, and developers kind of hated it. So I was like, okay, that's it. It's automated now. They're gonna love it. And then the first Slack message that I got after I announced proudly that now your deployments are automated is somebody was like, how do we turn that off? Meh, I'm not happy about that message. So what happened? Why did they ask to turn it off? I mean, I did it for them. Come on, it's good. It was very performant. I did it in a great amount of time. Don't you want to use my new thing? I should have asked them. And that's the exact change of the mindset that I'm talking about here. Because now I have customers that are using my tools and they sit across the hall from me. They find me before I had my coffee and ask me if I've seen the ticket that they opened, right? So I have the opportunity to just go ahead and ask them what they think about what I created. Ask them if they want it. Or maybe if there are some adjustments that I can make to make them want to use the tool that I just created. Because if you created the best program ever, it's performant, it's amazing, but nobody wants to use it, is it really that great? And the shift is, when I was a developer, I was told what I need to develop. Okay, there was a product manager. they had the discussions with the customers or with the upper management. They decided generally what's needed to be done in terms of new features. And then, we had they had the discussions with me, the developer, and then I got off, started doing things. They didn't tell me which library I should use or which language, unless it's, there is something that is already set in the entire company. So I wouldn't be that hero adding a new language just to one part of the code. Although some people like to do that, and that's just not fair. But anyway, yeah, I was told what is needed and not how to do that. But when you develop tools for developers, you need to start to think how you're doing things. Because DevOps is about fostering a culture of collaboration with the development teams. The code that I write is code that is later on going to be used by the developers. If I create code that is hard to understand, they're not going to use it. They're just going to ask me more and more questions about it. Maybe they will even make mistakes along the way that will cost time and money or production issues. They're going to wake me up at night. I don't want that. So this is very, very important. You're still a developer as a platform engineer, but now you're developing for people who are going to use the code that you write. So I'm going to give you an example of the next project that I worked on after that automation that I told you about. And we started doing migrations to Kubernetes about, I think, almost 2 years ago. And my challenge was to plan and develop the deployment definition for Kubernetes. What it means is that I needed to plan how we're going to define the Kubernetes resources for the applications. And so I had two options. I could have chose to go with the existing Python DSL that we already have for defining the cloud resources, or I could go and look for an industry standard tool, which is Helm, as an example. Now, I already learned that crucial lesson of asking the users what do they want and not decide for them. A lot of times, as a platform engineer, you think that you think like a developer, but you're not doing the same job. I mean, you're both working on code, okay, you both work at the same company, but the job of the developer is not the same job of the platform engineer. They work on the company's product. I work on products for the developers. So, asking the users, how do they do that? Okay, going to every one of the developers is not very efficient, so here's what I did instead. So, the kind of obvious and not very efficient, in my opinion, thing to do is to publish an architecture design review document. The problem with that is that you usually get the same people that replies because they like to write their opinion somewhere. So it's not the majority of the developers. Most of the time, it won't represent what the majority of the developers thinks. It's just that one brave soul who wants to tell you that you're wrong. So what I did is I created a Helm preview presentation, and I explained what is Helm. I explained what were the requirements that we had for a new tool or a new way to define the Kubernetes resources. And after I explained the requirements, I explained how the Python DSL answers those requirements and how Helm answers those requirements. And so this way, I was able to listen to my users live, because remember, user requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. When I presented to them the requirements that we had, and then how I'm going to answer those requirements with each of my possibilities, they were now able to be part of my design, part of my plan. And then later on, when comes the day when we need to do the Kubernetes migrations, they felt that they were part of it at the very beginning. And now I have that buy-in right from the start. And that's another thing that I needed to learn along the way. I'm going to need to get buy-in from people to want to use my products. Here's another thing that was very, very important in my process of becoming a platform engineer. Like I said, I wrote code that other people had to use on a daily basis, and they sat in the room across from me. So if I did a not so good job, I will definitely hear about that, right? So I can learn from other people's mistakes or successes, but not within the company, because it will always kind of stay the same pool of solutions and ideas. So what I did is to ask the community. I started to join different Slack workspaces, and I found a few WhatsApp groups, pretty big even, of platform engineers from different places in this world. And I started asking how they did something, and not very specific technical problems, but just generally, how did their users respond to Helm, for example? What was the transition that they made? I wanted to understand how the developers thought, if it was easy enough, it was too complex. I wanted to know what was their users' experience. And I asked them about the tools that they chose, the adoption plan, pain points, and pitfalls. And you need to remember that many companies face the kind of similar problems. I mean, nobody's a special snowflake, although we all like to think that we are. But if you start talking to other companies about their issues, of course, it's going to be a little bit different, but generally, they need to do deployment somehow. They need to do CI pipelines somehow. They maybe consider Kubernetes or already migrated to Kubernetes. So they probably have a thing or two to say about how they did things, what they regret. And I'm going to ask them about those regrets. I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to take it back in to the company where I work at, and I'm going to start from there. And to me, it was very special, this process of deciding on what do I want to do and whether I want to choose Helm or Python. And talking to other people from other companies was super, super helpful. So how did I get to those places, to those Slack workspaces? The first thing that I did was, obviously because I'm a speaker at many conferences, I just started asking other people in conferences. I was like, hey, did you get to work on this or that? Or some other speaker that I saw talk about similar issues, I approached to them, and this is how I got connected to more parts of the community. Another thing that I did, and I didn't know if I'm going to get replies or not. I just started to reach out to developers of some of the tools that we're using and repo maintainers, and I just hoped for the best. Because I thought, okay, if they're going to find it annoying that I reached out and not reply, okay, that's fine, whatever. But maybe I will get a reply from the person who wrote the new plugin that we use in our Jenkins pipeline, and now I can talk to that person and ask them questions. And that's a true story. And this person was so, so nice, and I got replies to the things that I needed to solve, and it just made it easier. So consider that. Maybe you won't get a reply, but if you do, it's going to be super awesome. And like I said, I joined some different community Slack channels, Slack workspaces, and Discord servers, and I just couldn't replace it with anything else in the world. So I think that this tip specifically could work also for developers, not just for platform engineers. I just felt that the problems or the challenges that I faced were much more general, and it made it easier for me to ask general questions and then get good enough replies. Okay, so now I think we're at my favorite part. How much time do I still have? Because I don't see the thing here, just to be sure if I can.
16 minutes.
Perfect, yay. Okay, so now is the part where I get to tell you to be the force. First of all, it looks really good on that slide, so I left it this way. But second of all, let's see what it really means. So the next challenge after I chose the Helm over the Python DSL that I talked about was to plan and prepare the migrations to Kubernetes. It was definitely time to use the Force because we have over 130 developers by now. I think it's 136, 410 microservices. We have 2 cloud providers, few regions and a few accounts, and that's it's going to be a big thing. It is a big thing. We've been doing that for almost 2 years now, and we are nowhere near done. So I had to start to prepare and plan how we're going to do those massive migrations. And I've seen, like I told you a little bit before, that by involving the developers early on in the design process, it helped me once I got to the point where I was like, hey, we're going to start doing the migrations now. And although the management decided that we're migrating to Kubernetes, I know it's not the top of your list, but that's my job. So let's get to do that. So how am I going to convince the developers that it's something that they should do, or they can do, or it's going to be easy to do? How do I do that? So first of all, I created what I called the discovery sessions. And that was for the benefit of both the developers and for me, not me personally, May, but me as the platform team. So the thing is that I decided to invest time and effort in communication channels, and I'm not talking about opening yet another Slack channel. I'm talking about creating those meetings where I discuss with each and every team, what do they have today? What are the requirements of their deployment process? What are the requirements of their CI process? What kind of cloud resources are they using today and why? And by doing that, I was able to first discover whether our Kubernetes offerings actually provide answers to all of those questions or all of those needs. And second of all, I was able to tell them if it is supporting, how we're going to do that. And I was able to estimate how long the migration is going to take. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, we need to do a migration, and just to say it will take about 2 weeks, and then you get to the point where you do the migration, and then it takes, I don't know, a month, 2 months, because you didn't make sure, you didn't do the estimations correctly. But if I sit with them and I give it an hour, I give it an hour and a half to do the discovery session, and I provide a more accurate estimation, then other teams will hear about it and they will want to join in. So that was a very crucial thing to do. Another thing was collaboration sessions on doing the migration themselves. Now, look, there are 130 developers, or 136, whatever. It doesn't, as if it matters, the exact number. I don't know why I keep being so accurate. But when I planned those migrations, I knew for a fact that I can't sit with every team and do the migration of every single service. We have over 400 services. So I needed a way to get them to do this, but also to provide enough support. So what I created was the collaboration sessions. I just had like those times scheduled in my calendar, and then also the other people from the platform team who were doing the migrations as well, where people were able to just join into that Google Hangout if they wanted to at specific times and just ask specific questions about their migrations. If they didn't need anything from me, cool. All good. They can also reach out to me anytime in Slack or find me in the hallway, but at least after 10 a.m. Come on, be gentle. But, the fact that they know that there are available time slots in my calendar or in any other platform engineer calendar, and it's a dedicated time for answering, questions on migrations. It means that they can either join and listen to questions from other developers or ask their own questions, or they just don't need anything, so I saved their time, right? what it did is it just increased the trust, because I say, here I am, I'm ready to take questions, I'm here to give you support, and it's a lot more than just saying, if you have a problem, reach out to me. So the last thing, and I think it's as important as the rest of the things, is what I called the documentation feedback loop. Now, the documentation feedback loop went like this. When I published I keep saying I, but it's obviously I wasn't there alone. It's a whole platform team. But yeah, when we published the documentation for the way that we instruct the developers to do the migration, we told them this: read the guide, but be lazy. If something looks too complicated, don't do it. If something looks annoying, don't do it. If you just, you don't like this, whatever, don't do it. But don't leave it like that. Write to us, okay? Comment what was the thing that you didn't want to do. Send someone a message, tell us this part is something that we couldn't handle, it didn't work, but I didn't want to just get the part that don't work. I wanted to get the experience. I wanted to know from them if it's something that was easy enough for them to do. So that's why I went like, just be lazy, because if something is not easy to write a documentation for, it does not mean that I need to improve the documentation. I need to improve the tool. And that's why I called it the documentation feedback loop, because I was able to go back to my tool and say, okay, I find it very difficult to explain how to do this in this step. I think I need to go and change the code. I think I need to go and change that tool, improve it, and then tell the developers to try again. So let's sum things up. We had three parts, 3 milestones so far, and that's where I'm at today. The first part was use your words, and what I meant by that is if you have complex architecture flow or any other complex documentation of something new that you need to learn, create your own architecture flows and then start to ask questions about those things that you created. Because once you start to use your own words to describe things that you see and you need to learn, you will find out what are the things that you don't understand or what are the things that you can maybe help to make them better later on. Ask calibrated questions that will help you to understand better not just the tools that are being used, but the why and the how that stands behind those tools. And then I'm just going to remind you of those very simple, stupid how-to guides. Creating new documentation doesn't always have to be like a 5-pager. It doesn't always have to be an endless Confluence page. It can sometimes just be a screenshot and a bunch of arrows, because that sometimes is all needed to describe a certain process or a certain way to do something. I think this is so crucial. The transition between being a backend developer and being a platform engineer was about learning to listen to my users and having them as part of my development process. Because user requests are just as critical as performance, cost, and ease of development when making architecture decisions. If you're creating a super performance system but nobody wants to use it, is it really that good? And last, be the force. Invest in communication channels with your users. Remember the documentation feedback that says, if something is too complicated to write documentation for, maybe you need to simplify the tool itself and not the documentation. Create meetings, but don't schedule meetings. Create meetings windows so people can join in, but don't waste their time if they don't need those meetings. Now, this is a very good question. And the reason for that is the answer is so simple. It's a yes. And with that, I will say thank you.